Hello and welcome to PCI Webinars. Today's webinar, The Basics of Project Management with Dean Russell. Dean is a professional strategic coach. He helps organizations and businesses increase their effectiveness through leadership coaching, training, and public speaking engagements. He has a gift and passion for helping people and organizations quickly grasp their company's vision, gain operational traction, and work as a healthy, functional, and cohesive team. Dean is a national speaker and recognized expert specializing in business management, leadership improvement, and better employee performance. Coming to you now, it's Dean Russell.
Thank you, Ann. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for showing up today. Thank you for your time and energy in this session. I love participation. Please ask questions. My introduction to project management started about 17 years with Department of Defense, and I learned a lot on doing projects with DoD. Then in the private sector, I'm also adjunct faculty at a few colleges. I teach project management. And the whole thing about project management, if you're tired of Prozac moments, Maalox moments, Jerry Springer moments, if you're tired of that, project management is a good place to come. Why? It's stress management tied with conflict management, tied with process management, configuration management. It's one place that resolves a lot of problems. So the enemy of project management is chaos. So if you have a problem with chaos, welcome. I think you're going to enjoy this session. So we do have a lot of material to cover. If I don't get finished, please review the rest of the materials. I'm going to go through it pretty fast. I've put the best of the best information in here. So normally this is like 30 hours. So we're going to do it in 1 hour. So please stand by. Here we go. The objective today is to understand taking strategy to action. So you have what's called strategic management, tactical management, operational management. The secret is how do you get the strategy to go to the operation? Second thing is a lot of people really don't understand what is project management. They throw the term projects out and they're really not familiar with what the term actually means. We're going to talk about the core components, the major stakeholders. Sometimes there's 5, sometimes there's 6. We're going to talk about Henry Gantt. 1910, Henry Gantt invented something called the Gantt chart. And he did it for a reason. He did it because he was frustrated with the way projects were going. It's a beautiful tool. We'll talk about that today. We're going to talk about risk. One of the beautiful things about project management is it's a freebie. You automatically become an expert in risk management. So anytime you see somebody that's qualified in project management or takes project management, automatically they become an expert in risk management. It's like two sides of a coin. So that comes with it. That's an extra. And then one of the things I think is really interesting is something called knowledge management. Knowledge management is required in project management because at the end of the project, you do a post-mortem. You talk about what went well first. Then you talk about lessons learned, and you grade the project from the customer point of view. So we're going to talk about what is the post-mortem and why should you do that. Can everybody hear me okay? Just a quick sound check. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Rebecca. I'm just double checking. So let's talk about the 3 Ps right off the bat. So the 3 Ps, this is a little nomenclature, a little bit of vernacular to let you know so you hear these terms, you might be confused. The big boy, the biggie, is the top one called portfolio management. So portfolio management is the hardest certification to get out of the 3. With portfolio management, it's the organization, the entire organization's group of projects that are selected and managed to achieve some type of organizational goal. So the portfolio management, every project in your organization falls under portfolio management. Below that is something called program management, which is a unique certification within itself. With the program, it's all the related projects that contribute to the same business goal. So the portfolio is all the different goals going on. The programs, you select one of those goals, and then you focus on that. The cool thing is, the same tools that work in project management also work in program management. So what is project management? The third P. A project is a temporary keyword, temporary endeavor to undertake to create a unique product or service. So the two words I won't come to over and over is unique and temporary. So just to reiterate, three P's. Portfolio is the big one. Underneath portfolio is programs. Underneath that is projects. Just an observation. A lot of companies have problems because there's nobody running programs. They have portfolios, they have projects, but there's no program step in between. That's kind of a vital part. So that's just make a note on that. So in the world, most projects fall under three categories. And you've heard of these three. So one's called revenue enhancement. There's a tool we use called 8 cash flow drivers. So this is a way to increase revenue, increase profit. So if you're looking at revenue enhancements, it's some way to bring money into the organization. I've done this for profit, not for profit, public, private, same things. We're trying to get some kind of funding. It could be a grant, for example. I did one recently for a grant for the Veterans Organization, Veterans Administration. And that was a pretty detailed grant process. One you've heard about probably a lot is cost reduction. That's where lean, all the Six Sigma, Kaizen blitzes, Kaizen events, Gemba walks. I do a lot of that. So my background is quality engineering. So I would say a majority of projects I've done have been cost reduction. Some where you're trying to minimize cost. And there are lots of different ways, different projects to do that. Six Sigma is probably the one you've probably heard the most, or lean, or the 5S is a kind of like a cost reduction. Everything has a place. The third one you might not have heard of. So the third one's the least popular of all three of these. The third one is business value. Kind of a weird name for what it is, because what it is, it's something you have to do to stay in business. So like revenue enhancements, kind of fun projects, cost reduction, getting the organization lean and streamlined. Those are kind of cool projects. Business value is either a federal guideline, state guideline, county guideline, specific industry guideline. It's something that you don't see adds value to the organization, but to stay in business, it adds value. So those are the compliance, regulatory. Does anybody have an example of a business value project? I don't see anybody popping in. So business value, again, is kind of like the regulatory compliance ones. The one thing I want to go back to real quick. If you notice, all three of these follows the same algorithm, the same process. You write a charter, which we're going to get to, which I have a free example that you can use. A Gantt chart, which is basically a waterfall event, calendar of events that happen. Risk matrix, which is Murphy's Law. What could go wrong with this project? Do the project, the operation, and then you finally do a post-mortem wrap-up. That's kind of like the normal sequence. So all three of these, no matter what type of project, follow the same type of process. The sequence. So just like anytime you're trying to start a business, like an entrepreneur or pajamapreneur, somebody wants to start a business, I hear a lot of times, okay, what's your business case? What's your justification? That's the first thing the bank's going to do. They're going to ask you for a business plan. They're going to ask you for a marketing plan. So bottom line is you got to have a reason why you're doing a project. It's easy if somebody's done the portfolio management. If somebody has, here's the annual objectives we'd like to get accomplished, and here's what we'd like to do the next 90 days. So now, if it's complex, I just want to make another note here because I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. If you're going to something very, very complex, and I'm talking nebulous, fuzzy, you don't know where to start, you're going, this is too big. I can't get a grip of this. There is a tool in project management I love called Work Breakdown Structure. WBS, you can look it up. If you look to the bottom right, you'll see there's a project. So the way WBS does, it has what's called the parent, the children, the grandchildren. So the project, let's say for example, is you would like to get married. And that's definitely a project. So task 1 would be finding a place to get married. Task number 2 would be the actual marriage itself. Task number 3 would be the reception. And so you break it down. And this is one of the big secrets of project management. You might want to write this down. Decomposition. Decomposition. If there's one word that's a secret of all projects, it's breaking it down. So you understand exactly. You go from macro to micro. So WBS is a tool I'm not going to spend too much time on because a lot of times people know what they want to do. And we can go straight to the Gantt chart. But if it's really fuzzy, you might want to do a WBS. The charter is going to be the plan. And then the Gantt chart is a tool, a visual tool. It helps you schedule and keep commitments and responsibilities of what's supposed to happen. The visual layout of the actions. So it's an action-based chart. So, key question, I like to make this interactive. What are your initiatives? Now, projects, what's the timeline? The ideal time is 90 days or shorter. And in that 90 days, no person should ever be tasked with doing more than 7. 7 or less. 3 is great. So if you're doing like over 7 projects in the next 90 days, you got a lot on your plate. So can anybody share with me any of the current key initiatives you've got, projects you've got going on? Expanding hours, thank you. Getting ready for re-innovation for a library of historical documents. You're going to love this class, Anthony. That would be a great project. Moving to office. These are all fantastic. Anytime you've got something a little bit bigger. And so project management is time management on steroids. It takes all those getting it done, to-do lists, and it puts it in one place so you can get a grip of what you're trying to do. So moving to Mango Discovery Tool. Thank you, Rebecca. Shift in library collections. Yeah, anything's got lots of moving parts. That's what project management was developed for, to make sure that you can identify and track the major things that have to happen. What is project success? Question group. So we're going to talk about simplifying project management. Here's a project, and there's 4 basic stages. Some classes teach 6, some teach 5, but let's just go with 4. So the left side of the screen, we've got stage 1 initiation, and that means we're kind of looking at, is this something we should do? Is it viable? Is it feasible? Stage 2 is yes, green light. Let's go to planning. Stage 3, you're doing. You're actually in operation mode. You're implementing the project. Stage 4 is closeout. So if you had to pick with 100% in the number, where should you spend the majority of your time? The left side of the screen or the right side of the screen? And if so, about what would you break that percentage? Like 50-50, 40-60, 80-20? So just a question, if you had to spend your time in project management, you've got a project, you know there's 4 stages. On the left side, initiation and planning. The right side, implementation and closeout. What do you think you should spend the majority of your time? Thank you. Yes. Left-hand side. Yeah, that's where most people make the mistake. They go straight from initiation stage 1 to stage 3. I show up as an auditor. I'm a quality management system auditor. I show up and I go, what happened to stage 1 and 2? What did you skip? Somebody did what I call a drive-by assignment in the hallway. Hey, what are you doing? Could you do this? So you go straight to stage 3. No, one thing you learn in project management is spend the time. So let's go with 70-30. 70 on the left, 30 on the right. You want to spend the majority of your time, so there's no, we call it S&S. No shock, no surprise. You hate shock and surprise on a project. If you do it right, you minimize that. So I mentioned this earlier. So from PMI, Project Management Institute, they're the ones that are responsible for the certifications if you like one. A PMP is a professional, a project management professional. So a project is a temporary endeavor. Temporary, let's just write down 90 days or less. Let's just make sure that it doesn't ever go over 90 days. That's a program. We're just running projects. Unique. So unique is a interesting word. For the sake of today, let's substitute new. New. That means you've never done it before. New to you. So if you're building a deck, you've built lots of decks. You're going to somebody's house and you're building a deck. It's really not a project. It's just called a work initiative. You've done it before, you're just transferring to a different location. A project, you've never built a deck before. You're not sure where to start. That would be the ideal time for the tools to give you the most value. You've never done it before. Open up the project management toolbox. It was designed to help you. That's what it's meant for, to give you that edge. Count the black dots. So, this is where I see a lot of times people go, I'm not sure where to start. I go, let's do the charter first. Let's figure out what's going on. So getting back to the definition of project, a lot of times people use the word project as just a word for work initiative, but an actual work initiative, ordinary work, is something that's ongoing. It's the same process over and over and over, same output, and you got predefined work assignments. You've done it before. Projects, by definition, temporary, 90 days or less, have a definitive, and I'm talking about definitive Tuesday at 4:15 p.m. we shut it down. It has a unique, definite beginning and end, unique output, and which can be product or service, and it has varying work assignments. That means there's a little bit of moving parts in it. So the next exercise, is it a project or is it ordinary work? Hiring a sales team for a new office. Well, it could be both. If you've hired sales teams in 3 other cities, you're coming to the 4th city, it's probably ordinary work. You've never done it before, it's a project. Fulfilling customer orders, probably ordinary work, unless it's a gigantic customer and it's their first time and there's a lot of complexity. Writing and publishing a book. Quick question, how many of you have actually written a book before? Show of hands. Okay, if you've not written a book before, it would probably be a project. For Stephen King, probably his 20th book, it'd probably be more like ordinary work. He's got it down to a process. Teaching Sales 101, if you've done it before, again, it's ordinary work. Not done it, might be a project. Performance reviews. Now here can be some moving parts. If you've got 5 or 6 people, you've never done it before, you might use the project management tools to make sure you keep it organized on time and have the expectations defined. If you've never produced a company's annual report, probably project work. Or if there's been a merger acquisition, it could be project. Writing a letter to a prospect, depending on the prospect, depending if you've done it before. Ordering office supplies, I don't see any way to make that a project unless there's something new, unique, and different. Different vendor, for example, and they have an EAP or ERP that's different. Design project management class, and normally is for me, it'd be ordinary work. Maybe somebody's never done it, it'd be a project. This last one, I laugh with a sense of humor because I've had a lot of students tell me point blank, a quilted comforter is always a project. So I've learned to just give up on that. Say, okay, if you say so. So I kept that in there because every time I brought it up, somebody always make the argument that no way is a quilted comforter ordinary work. This slide is everything you need to know about project management in one slide. Try to make it just one slide. So if you could, maybe blow up this slide if you're doing projects. It kind of gives you an overview. So it's that whole decomposition. The charter is where it all starts. What kind of quality am I looking at? What kind of time do I have? And bottom line is what's going to be my resources, especially money. For scope and boundaries, objectives, what are we going to use for metrics, rubrics to measure this? So in project management, you have some tools. One of those I'm sure you've heard of before, return on investment. There's one called NPV, net present value. There's a lot of variance costs. So there's some tools. You don't have to use those, but those are tools in project management. Estimation tools, you got the WBS, there's something called PERT charts, CPM's called critical path method. Gantt chart is a way of tracking what's happening. Milestone reviews are used in Six Sigma or GATE. Affinity diagrams I want to talk about a little bit later. There's SWOT analysis. For risk, we're going to talk about a risk matrix. So I'm actually going to go into risk today, but there's FEMA. If you've ever done FEMA analysis or DFEMAs, there's other tools out there we could spend a lot of time on, but for the sake of today, risk matrix should do the job. And then lessons learned, you document and you make it easier for somebody else that's following in your path doing a similar project not to make the mistakes that you did. So it's a form of continuous improvement. Stakeholders. So this is a term you hear a lot with projects. Who are the stakeholders? And there's a few of them. So the biggest one, the one that most people talk about the most is sponsor. And I'm going to break these down for you in a second. So the sponsor is going to be the one that gives you the project. So scope is how long the project lasts. Deliverables, there's going to be a final deliverable. It goes like this. Upon successful completion of this project, I will have accomplished what? So that happens in the first page of the charter. What's going to be my deliverable? What resources will I need, especially if there's any money involved, people involved? What are going to be the risk and the sub-projects? So there's two things on this page that are interesting to me because it's a mnemonic. On this page, among these key terms, are the two biggest problems in project management. So the two biggest problems in project management actually rhyme. One is called scope creepage, and the other one's called resource leakage. One can cause the other. Scope creepage, resource leakage. So the stakeholders are the people involved in the project and affected by the project. They're going to be the ones that are going to help you contribute to completing the project. The sponsor, we're having a hard time saying this word. There's a word on here I want you to write down. It's a real big word. It's called ENSURE, insure. Does anybody listening have a teenage driver? Yeah, if anybody's got a teenage driver, you'll appreciate this word. So most of you have a teenage driver, and let's say they're 16, and they just got their driver's license. Well, there's a word called chaos. And insurance companies are looking at this. So what you have to do to get your child on the road is you have to purchase insurance, INSURANCE. Insurance, and it's going to be pretty high insurance because they're a brand new driver. Somewhere when they get around 25, we have assurance, ASSURANCE. Assurance means you have confidence. They've been driving for a while, they've got the experience, less mistakes. The ultimate word in project management is insure, ENSURE, insurance. That terms mean that you have designed the project to be robust. It's like a raft. Rafts are compartmentalized. If you're going whitewater rafting, you're going down a river, you hit a rock, one of the compartments breaks, the others keep it in tight. So with project management, that's why we spend all that time on planning, making sure we do due diligence up front to find out what's going on, who else has done a project like this, what did they learn from last time. Let's ensure a successful completion of the project. So the sponsor is usually your boss. Normally that's the way it works out. Sometimes you are the sponsor, you are the project manager, you are the customer. But most of the times in project management, the sponsor is your boss. One of the problems we've encountered is SAD, seasonal or sponsor attention deficit disorder. And what happens is the sponsor forgets you're already doing a few projects. So they haven't put it down anywhere, and you get assigned more projects. So they see you and they go, hey, while you're doing this, could you do this? So that's a term I made up. Hope you find it humorous. But what we're trying to do is say, okay, sponsor, here's the projects I'm already doing. So we have that documentation on that charter down pat. The guy named Peter Taylor is really famous, and I'm going to make a recommendation for a book or a podcast, The Lazy Project Manager. It's also a book, but he has a great podcast. And his research says the biggest issues we have with sponsors by themselves on projects, is they're unapproachable. You can't get to them. Number two, their access, you can't get to them again, doesn't get it. They don't actually understand what the project's about. They don't listen to you. If they do listen to you, they don't follow through and act on your advice, and they're not playing the role. Which means you're supposed to be the sponsor. You have authority levels I don't have. I need your help. This is from stress management. If you've ever been doing a project, which is something timely, quality-wise, cost-wise, something you got to get accomplished, and you get exhausted. Well, in stress management, they actually have a definition. Energy applied with no results. That's why it's critical to have the sponsor involvement up front. We make sure we lay the project completely out, and we get the sponsor's review and approval on that charter. That saves you from exhaustion. The biggest problems I've seen in project management overall, besides the sponsor issues, is one, the project was too tightly scheduled. And what I mean by that, you're supposed to give yourself a 10% buffer. So in project management, we want progress, not perfection. Has anybody here ever worked with a perfectionist as a project manager? And was that a pleasant experience? Yeah, if you work with a perfectionist, usually it's not good enough and they keep it too tight. We want you to enjoy the project. We want it to be reasonable. And so we want you to give yourself buffer time, which is part of Agile and the other programs, to make sure you give yourself a reasonable, that's the key word, a reasonable amount of time to accomplish this. Another problem is it was never defined. And there's something called the arc of distortion. An arc of distortion says, I thought I understood what you were asking. The problem is I wasn't sure and I didn't clarify. So the charter, the document I keep talking about, make sure you ask the appropriate questions so there's no shock or surprise, S&S. Another thing with other members of the project, you have poor communication. A piece of advice I'll give you, if you're doing a project with somebody else that's at another satellite location, always get their backup. So if you're not available, projects going forward, what would be a good email address, a good phone number? Always have an alternate available that has the authority level, because I've seen people go on vacation or have a family emergency and the project gets stopped because we didn't have a backup. So please, as you're doing projects, especially with other outside components, make sure you got a backup person. One of the biggest problems is the customer says, can I have it now? So whoever you're doing this for, it could be the sponsor, it could be the customer. I've decided to move it forward. Let's just reduce the scope on this. One is you don't get the correct stakeholders, the right people helping with the project, wrong people selected. Wrong people selected, I'm going to make a suggestion on number 6. It's called GWC. With the people, you want people that get it, that want to do it, and have the capacity to do it. GWC. Get it, want it, and capacity. On number 7, nobody does lessons learned, so you keep making the same mistakes over and over. Deja vu. And then number 8, nobody's getting the best practices, what went right, and duplicating that, formalizing that, so we all have some kind of document when we go into our next project. We don't have to make the same mistakes. The charter is a mini business plan. The one I've given you has about 8 pages, and it's got about every question you could come up with to ask to make sure you're doing everything right, your decomposition in the project. It's a way to make sure that all the people are going the same direction. Everybody's got the same goal in mind. One of the first questions you'll see in the charter is, what is the final deliverable? And it's like a if you saw the movie City Slickers and Curly looks around, it's the one thing he told him. He goes, Billy Crystal, Jack Palance goes, what's the one thing? And that's what project management does. What is the one thing that will be done at the end of this project? Upon successful completion of this project, we will have done what? So you got to get it down to one, not 5 things. What is the one major accomplishment that's going to be delivered to the customer? That's called a final deliverable. Organizational deliverables are outcomes of the project as you go toward the final deliverable. It could be a document, it could be some type of plan, some type of blueprint. So anything that you're doing that's valuable to the organization as you go through the project, you share with other people and say, by the way, here's an organizational deliverable that helps us out. It's a byproduct of the project. This is you. This is you, the project manager. And of course, the first thing you see is the word ensure. And ensure says, again, it's the ultimate responsibility. I make sure the customer who I'm doing the project for is satisfied. And the project was done on time, quality correctly, and within the constraints outlined in the charter. So you're the one that, bottom line is the sponsor supposed to create the project plan? I normally don't see that. I see you create the plan and carry out the plan. But in the project management world, the sponsor is supposed to basically write the plan and give it to you. Your job is to facilitate the team. So you got the sponsor stakeholder, starts the project, you're the project manager, and then you have team members. I would like to suggest 2 words here. Low maintenance. When you pick out people on your project to help you with your project, sometimes you get what's called high maintenance people. And high maintenance people rob you of 2 things, time and energy. What I think you'd prefer as running a project, you make sure that you have people that are low maintenance that want to do that. GWC, they get it, they want it, they got the capacity to do this. The customer is who you're doing the project for. So in project management, after the sponsor has a discussion with you, the next person you talk to is the customer. And you say, here's what the sponsor has an idea for, and customer, what would you like? So this is great for reducing stress and reducing people going off track. What's called variance. You ask the customer, what is it you exactly want? And I use the 6 W's, who, what, when, why, where, and how. And usually the customer's one providing some type of funding, or the sponsor is. Let them review the milestones. This is the duration of the project. Here's the steps along the way we're going to do at what time. That's a Gantt chart. And they accept the final deliverable. So before you start the project, the customer reviews the project, which is going to help guarantee and ensure your success. Suppliers are anybody that's giving things to the project, timely inputs, what kind of quality do you want, you get with them, they're your partners, providing resources. Functional managers is a unique term in project management. Normally, when you see this word, risk goes up. This is a risk factor. What I mean by that, these are your peers. These people that you have to go through to have their support doing the project. So you really need to make sure you have their support and their time commitments before you start the project, because they don't have to do the project. You don't have the authority level over them. But yeah, my plan is always get these people involved up front. Make sure they're with me on this project, because they can be, if they're not with you, they can be a problem. They can actually sabotage your project. Oh, I was going to be there Tuesday. Oh, I forgot about it. Yeah, that's the kind of things we would like to avoid. Pick 3 exercise. So 3 things, and this is a tool I think you'll enjoy, because 1 affects 2. So at the top of this triangle, I want you to write the word quality. So the quality of the project is the precise requirements that are needed. What's going to be quality on this project? What are you looking for? Define the quality of the project and deliverables. Number 2 is time. So in project management, we say, for example, seconds are better than minutes, minutes are better than hours, hours are better than days, days are better than weeks, shorter is better. So what is our time on this? Do we have 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks? Do I have the full 90 days? So we have to figure these 3 things out before we start the project. What's the quality? How much time do we actually have? And number 3, it's going to be resources. Resources are going to be mainly people, money, copiers, anything you're going to need for resources to actually complete your project. Most people just put the money sign on that. What's the money sign? So group, let me ask a quick question, because this thing can save you a lot of problems in projects. You're running a project and somebody comes up and says, I would like to make a change. Instead of 3 weeks, I'd like it done tomorrow. So on number 2, down at the bottom left, you have that time. I'm asking a question to the group. What could happen? Could quality and resources be affected if somebody says, I want you to shorten the time to do the project? Normally what I do is I draw an up or down arrow on each one of these. And I draw this out. I actually draw this out. People stop me and go, Dean, especially the sponsor, I'd like you to add this to the project. And I go, okay. So that's going to take, it might affect the quality of it. The quality arrow goes down, not up. The time's going to go up, and then the resources are going to go up. So this is a good self-protection Kevlar mechanism just to help you. It's just a pen and paper, or after a while you get to it, you can do it mentally. But when somebody says, I want to do a revision or modification to the project, I want to change it, I want you to just think in your head, okay, quality, time, resources. Changing one's automatically going to affect the other 2. It's going to go up or down. Then it gives you a chance to go back and say, I can do this. However, there'll be a few changes to the project scope. Because this is where people get sabotaged. Somebody does a change and don't factor in 1 affects 2. So quality is going to be a big success factor, the results that you actually want, quantifiable preferably. Time, how long is it going to take? And then resources with the budget being one of the major factors. Do we have the money to do this? Do we have the people to do this? I've got some commandments. These are from PMI, so the commandments. Gain consensus of a project, and consensus in this world means 80% agreement, 100% support. A lot of times you're not going to get to 100% agreement, but when we do the project, we get the charter, then we get the stakeholders together, we lay it out, and then we say, bottom line is, I need 80% agreement, but 100% support. We walk out of this room. So that way you've got everybody, again, helping you and not talking about you behind your back. So consensus is kind of critical to the project. I already talked about the best team. Another factor is this viable term. Is the project doable within the time frame that we have? Is it actually a viable project with the resources we have? Is this viable? Is it doable? That should be one of the first questions that people ask. It's okay to say no to a project. Say, under the way the resources are allocated now, it's not viable. We'll have to change something to make this viable. How much stuff you really need? Realistic schedule. Realistic, you might want to make a note. People go on vacations. People have other meetings to go to. They have other things going on. So again, do you have the capacity to help me with this project at this time? I'll need 3 hours a week. Again, get back to reality. Just don't say yes or no, can you help me? Realistically, can you help give me 3 hours a week? If you can make it quantifiable, it helps the stakeholder to give you what they can and cannot do. Learn to say no. Don't try to do more than can be done. People count. I see a lot of people that are good at the hard skills, not the soft skills. So in project management, you always want to take the time to actually treat the people with, the key word would be respect. There's a great book I'll recommend called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Patrick Lencioni. He talks about every team you need to have trust as a major factor. That means give your word and keep your word. Project management has formal. Thank you for saying you recommend. Yeah, Patrick Lencioni. He is a great author. Formal in project management means in writing. So we don't do informal. Everything's formal. We actually document everything that's supposed to happen, all the expectations, all the requirements, everything's formalized. We have the documents, the charter being the main one. Be willing to change because project management is change. Something's got to change. And a lot of times people don't resist the project, they resist the change to the project. Keep people informed what you're up to. So once a week, we'll do a report to all the stakeholders and give them an update because sometimes that communication can help you, especially if you got scope creepage or resource leakage. It can help people give you additional resources. And be a leader as well as a manager. And what I mean by being a leader is 100% tied to change. You are a change manager. One tool that's a very, very basic tool, and you'll go, Dean, it's too basic. But there's one field of school of project management says, always start off with the sponsor and the customer and say, what are the musts versus the wants? Let's just break this down. What is the absolute must have? So you brainstorm a list, and then you go through the list after you brainstorm it and say, what goes on the left-hand side? What goes on the right-hand side? Must versus wants. This is one of the best tools in project management. So it's called affinity diagram, and I use this in process triage too. This is where you get all the people doing a project in a room, and basically the stakeholders, and you get a bunch of post-it notes, and you give each person a post-it note and say, okay, here's the start of the project, here's the end of the project. Just brainstorm one action per post-it note, all the things that you think we need to do. And normally a person comes up with 20, 25 individual post-it notes. And then you go up on a whiteboard and just start posting all the notes. Everything goes up there. And then as a team, you start doing what's called a chronology. Start on the left. So here's the start. At the far right, this is the end of the project. Now let's start organizing these by what should happen when. And what happens is it creates a natural affinity. People start moving the post-it notes around. And then I say, is there a parallel task we can do? Like, can this one go under this one? We can do both at the same time. What's missing? And it gets out of people's heads into an actual tangible breakdown. And a lot of times that helps you do the Gantt chart. It helps you do all the other tools in project management under this affinity diagram. Also, you'll see there's a Q factor. When I do the post-it note, I ask them to put down, how long do you think it will take? Minutes, hours? So I ask people to actually put some kind of time duration on the actual post-it note itself. That way, if you're looking at the time on this, you can start getting a better factor for if it's doable or not. Gantt chart was invented by Henry Gantt, 1910. Henry Gantt was tired of all the scope creepage in the plant. So what he designed was a way to make sure he could tell if one of his stakeholders was not doing their part. So he developed this chart. It looks like a waterfall. I'll show you the next slide. But you can see what's happening. So if I got scope creepage, I can see the waterfall doesn't look like a waterfall. It's turned into a river. They're easy to comprehend. It's called line of sight accountability. And it shows you thinking through the whole project, what needs to be created, what needs to be where. So here's what it looks like. Milestone schedule, that's at the top, no more than 10, according to Project Management Institutes. So you break down 10 maximum milestones you're going to accomplish, and then the Gantt chart will look like a waterfall. You start the project, so you create the master Gantt chart. Then as you go through the real project, you keep what's actually happening in real time. You can compare, contrast to what you predicted what's actually happening. And with the post-mortem, especially if people use the post-mortem, projects get better going forward because we can see when and where, how the mistake happened. Anyway, I love Gantt charts. They're very easy to make. Pen and paper, people in the room say, okay, here's the start date, here's the end date. Here's all the little action items we did in the affinity diagram. Let's map it out now to 10 weeks. Risk. So there's two types of risk in project management. One is you can mitigate the future, and the other one's called crisis management. What's plan B? What's the contingency? And the way we look at this, we have two factors we use. One is called, what is the probability of this happening? So I call this Murphy's Law exercise. I get the same stakeholders in a room and I go, Murphy's Law, what could go wrong with this project? Just brainstorm. Everybody brainstorm. Things that could go wrong. Do as many as you can. And then we get the Post-it notes. I go, okay, so what we're going to do is try to figure out what is the probability of this happening. This actually has numbers that's quantifiable. Low is 1 to 40%. Medium probability, 41 to 70. Plus 70, high probability. So that's going to be on the vertical axis. On the horizontal axis will be what's called seriousness. Seriousness is low seriousness, we take a hit, we keep going. Medium seriousness, we got scope creepage. We got resource leakage. High seriousness, forget the project. The project is doomed. This would actually kill the project. So I take all those Post-it notes and I put it into a risk matrix. So the left side is probability. That low, 1 to 40%, medium 41 to 70, high 71 plus. So here's the probability on the left side, and then the seriousness is at the left. Why does this help you as a project manager? I only am concerned about the top right two squares. It's not this high, medium probability, high in risk. Then for every Post-it note that hits in there, the rule is you try to take 3 actions to contain that problem. The best option is mitigate it. Let's stop it before it happens. If you can't stop it, then what are the contingencies? What can we do? So for each action in that, again, or each Post-it note, try to come up with 3 actions to resolve the risk. There's also 2 other types of risk we talk about in the projects. One's called business risk, one's called project risk. A lot of my students think this is the most important lesson in the whole class. I'll tell you the difference between the two. A business risk is how important is it to the library? I mean, really, how important is this? So if you look at this scale, 10, no risk involved, it's a lot of fun. 1, you've got to have super control, no risk is allowed. And the reason this is important to you is that you get all the projects that are going on and give it a business risk number. That means you prioritize the projects. So if I'm on 10 project, I'm having fun. 1, 2, and 3 are called insomnia projects. Insomnia because you lose sleep because they're that important to the organization. You can't fail. 1, you definitely cannot fail. So 1, 2, and 3, no risk is allowed. So that's the business risk. What number do you have? Low number means it's pretty important, and you make a project board that has them ranked in order. So 1 outranks 2, 2 outranks 3. So if it comes to resources, we've got this same triage where we can know who gets the resources. Project risk is how you want to run the project. 10, you're having fun. You got the right people. Everything's defined out. No problems. 1, there's a lot of changes. There's a lot of complexity. And so you have to stay on top of it. The 2 numbers do not necessarily correlate. I have been on 1 project and I ran it as a 10. It was easy. I've done it before, basically, different time and place, but I knew what to do. I knew the people involved. I wasn't worried about it. I've been on business risk 10 and ran it like a 2 because all the A team players were gone. I was having to go down to C team players, and I knew I was going to put a lot more upfront time in defining what I expected. So business risk, project risk. Tips for looking at the budget. If you have a budget, look at the time, how much people make, kind of do an overall estimate. HR can help you with this. So you do want to have an estimate. How many hours, how much time will it take? Are there any internal costs? How accurate do I have to be? And high-end checks with the sponsor and customer. Constraints. One thing you want to ask the sponsor for sure, is there any constraints going into this project? For example, Larry's on another project. You can't use him for 3 weeks. What is going on? I can't touch, I can't use. Is there anything happening? No new hiring, for example. Okay. There's the computer system's going down. It's not going to be available for 2 days. Only use this printer. So one of the great questions in project management is ask the constraints as you're doing your charter. Sponsor, is there anything I can't use? People I can't touch? Anything I need to know? And that's always a very good question. Variances, we're wrapping this up now. On the variances, in project management, you don't want positive or negative variance. What you want to do is predict exactly what's going to happen and hit it successfully. Positive variance said you were, a lot of people like positive variance because you save money, you save time, you come in under budget. But in project management, no, that sometimes can be just as bad as negative variance. What we're saying is shoot for 0 variance. That's 100. That's an A+. So we got 25% negative variance. We're getting some real problems. 50% negative variance, positive or negative. There's some definite planning issues. The good news, and I like to give you good news, if you have a variance of 10%, that's an A+ in project management. So we don't want you to be a perfectionist. We don't. We want you to be reasonable, and we understand things happen. It's a lot of change. So we give you 10% variance up front. So that's what I tell people. Don't fudge the reports. Just be honest. We can't fix it unless we know exactly what happened. But you get a 10% variance. The normal variances goes in this flow chart for you. It says, did I hit a variance? What type of variance? Why did it happen? And the question is there something we can do to resolve this going forward? Or for the next people doing a similar project, they don't hit the same barrier. Wrap it up. Your final report will be, did I meet the final deliverable? Did I meet the criteria results? Did the milestones happen on time? The dates, the actual completion, was the budget, resources, did that work out as planned? And how many changes did I make to the plan itself, to the project itself? If I made changes, explain why. Lessons learned is the final thing I'd like to discuss because the organization gets better. You don't make the same mistakes. You keep learning from other people's projects, the good and the bad. And with that, I'd like to wrap it up and say thank you for coming today. Thank you, Andrew, for giving me the opportunity to present. And if there's any final questions, I'll be really glad to answer them.
Thanks, Dean. Give everybody a minute here to see if there are any questions. Got a great crowd today.
Well, for all of you, I definitely appreciate your time. Project management is not hard. You can do a lot of it with just pen and paper. And the charter I gave you, I hope will help you out. And I really deeply wish you the best luck on projects. It's a science. And it's repeatable, it's reproducible, it's not art. You can make it happen.
There you go. Make it happen. All right, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I want to thank you all for attending. And thank you, Dean, for stuffing all of these project management techniques into one show. That was, would you say 13 hours stuffed into one? That's pretty good.
I'll say we covered a lot of ground.
Yes, you did. You did. But you gave them a taste for all the tools that are out there. So perhaps they'd want to explore some of those further, but that's a great way to start. So thank you all for coming, and thank you, Dean. We hope to see you again soon at another PCI webinar. Have a great afternoon, everybody.